everything is so postmodern now. You can't just say what it is anymore because it's this whole legal game of, oh, actually, technically, that's not pursuant to, Rule 5734. It doesn't count as this. It's like, okay, well, but the basic picture that ordinary people hear when they say,
yeah, there's a great story this guy Stephen Kzer told on my buddy Danny Jones's podcast. It's like 4 or 5 years ago. So Stephen Kzer was a longtime journalist at New York Times, was a bureau chief in a lot of different places. He's one of the guys, I think, who was like breaking the MK Ultra story, or like who really dug into that. But he was talking to Danny about after Carter left office. He had known Jimmy Carter a little bit. He happened to be the bureau chief, maybe down in like South America as a whole for New York Times. So maybe a year after Carter left office, something like that, he was coming down for a visit. So I think his name's Stephen Kzer. Can we check that, Joe? Stephen Kzer, Danny Jones. It would have been like 4 or 5 years ago. I just want to make sure I'm getting it right. But, he hits up, I guess he hits up like through an emissary or whatever, hits up Carter and says, hey, let's get a drink. So gets a drink with Jimmy Carter. And they're sitting there talking, and after a while, it is? Okay. So after a while, he's like, all right, fuck it. Let me ask him. It's been a year. I'll ask him about this. So he's like, what's it like becoming president? And Jimmy Carter's like, oh, my God, dude, it's fucking insane, yada, yada, yada. He's like, well, what'd you do, like, when you first got in there? What's your first order of business to, like, learn how to do this job that's impossible? And he goes, well, I called every living president and invited them in separately for a meeting to get advice. And so Kinzer's like, all right, fuck it, I'm going to ask him, who gave the best advice? And Carter smiled and said Nixon. And Kinzer's like, all right, why did Nixon give the best advice? And he goes, well, he walked in there and he said, all this shit that they fight about, the domestic stuff, the health care, the fucking taxes, it's 5% one direction or another. Congress controls it. You can't do shit about it. It's all bullshit. The foreign policy, though, that's what they don't see, and that's where you got the power. And I think about that all the time because it gets truer and truer every time I notice something. Like, presidents can do something with a pen behind closed doors with the Pentagon or some of these Joint Chiefs of Staff and stuff. And, a little drone strike here in Yemen. And people are like, where the fuck is Yemen? And then they don't realize the reverberations of what something like that means. And then it affects them at home in a way they can't see 10 years later.
They are so good at, okay, so the debate now about the military in Mexico. Look at how it's discussed. They say there will be no invasion, there will be no military invasion, but so that's about Title 10, like formal military authority. That doesn't
Title 10?
Yeah, so that's like the legal code for like formal, like internationally recognized combatants. What that doesn't cover is intelligence operations, special operations. And so you see this all the time when they say there are no boots in Ukraine. What that doesn't cover is JSOC units, is people seconded to the CIA, which we have in there in fairly significant number. And we have in, I'm sure, going in and out of Mexico too. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Like for intelligence collection at the very least. So when they say no military, they're saying no Marines, like regular guys. Like, yeah, of course they're not going to do that.
Take the uniform off.
Yeah, exactly. Just put them under the CIA, put them in a task force, and suddenly they're not boots on the ground anymore.
It's like with Ukraine, there's a dude landing like a fucking C-130 or whatever it is right now, walking off the back with a bunch of small bills cash, or large bills cash, I should say, handing in a bag. And
oh yeah,
that's what
SEALs,
it's a proxy
Delta,
war.
Targeting support. I mean, they're maybe not shooting at them, but everything short of that, for sure.
It's so strange how the world that we live in is really just about semantics.
Totally. Everything is so postmodern now. You can't just say what it is anymore because it's this whole legal game of, oh, actually, technically, that's not pursuant to, Rule 5734. It doesn't count as this. It's like, okay, well, but the basic picture that ordinary people hear when they say no invasion, they think that means nothing. They're not thinking this legal stuff that the administration is doing.
When did this click for you? Like when, you're a green kid coming out at first, like making whatever stories you can go and like covering something, obviously enjoying it. And it seems like you really do enjoy your job now too, which is great, but you know a lot more. So when did it start to click for you? Was there like one story or one moment along the way besides Snowden where you're like, oh, this shit is nothing like what I thought? People don't understand how this really works.
I mean, there was no one moment, but if I had to point to like an inflection point, it'd be my editor, who himself is a veteran of a lot of these newsrooms. He used to be Seymour Hersh's researcher for a number of years.
Oh, wow.
He worked at the Times, the LA Times, I mean, everywhere. This guy was like, he reported, his big scandal was he reported on the nuclear facilities that I think NATO had in Europe during the Reagan administration, and they tried to prosecute him for it.
I don't know
he's
anything.
Like an old hand.
What happened?
Here's the interesting thing.
That.
Yeah, so he doesn't promote himself at all. He's just like loves the reporting.
Who is this guy?
William Arkin. That's my editor here. And so he had a lot of experience that I didn't, and crucially had an insight into pre 9/11. And so he could tell me stuff that is like unique to this time. I don't know if you ever had the experience where it's like pre-internet time. I'm barely old enough to just foggily remember it.
Right.
But if you talk to people, it's like, oh yeah, people used to be way more in touch. And it's kind of like, I'm trying to imagine that and I can't really, And so having somebody who's seen the administrations come and go, who's seen the approaches change over time has helped so much to inform. And that's another big loss that you see in journalism is as the revenues have dwindled, for reasons I think are largely the fault of media. I'm not defending them.
Yep.
But part of that is that it just becomes this kind of pit stop career where people will do it for a few years when they're young, and then they go on to become, crisis affairs response for some big corporation or something. It's lost a lot of that experience that would tell somebody, hey, all this post 9/11 shit is bad because it used to be this. And I don't even have a concept of really what it was before that beyond what I can read. So to hear someone and have somebody that has that perspective is really beneficial.
Yeah, that guy's he's lived through the wars. That's cool to have that.
He was the first to report the above top secret plans to invade Iraq, and it was codenamed Polo Step, and it launched biggest. This was it would have been 2002. And it launched the biggest leak investigation, I think, in U.S. history at Rumsfeld's behest. So this guy has like huge stuff. And here's the thing: he doesn't ever promote himself because he doesn't care.
That's great, obviously. So he's in it for the love of the game. I love that. That's great. But like, you have that pulled up already, Joe? It looks like he's got it. Maybe we can see it over here.
Yep.
This is what you're talking about? Top secret.
He was the one that
Polo
reported that. Yep. Above top secret. I think
shit.
it was a special access program, if I remember right.
So do you remember what happened here? I mean, I can try to read some of it, but
yeah. So basically, the Bush administration was not being honest about what was going to happen, and he
they weren't? No way.
And so he was actually able to get the actual name of the program, and they had created I think a special compartment for planning this thing, and kept it fairly small. And I think he wrote about it for the LA Times at the time. So he broke that. And it's just like, it just goes to show the fact that the rest of the media didn't report that. I mean, he himself was former military intelligence, has a lot of perspective from both inside and outside, that informs, what he does. And crucially, he's critical of these institutions in a way that I think a lot of, press likes to think they're critical, but since they rely on them for sourcing so much, you have a audience capture of the sort that's kind of similar to social media, where people end up having to say things that they know their audience wants to hear. In that same fashion, the media has to not say things that their sources don't necessarily want to hear because they don't want to lose their sources. And he's always been willing to burn bridges.
Well, that's a huge point right there. And I know you've run into this before. It's like, the access journalism becomes a drug because people are like, oh my God, it took fucking 6 years to develop this amazing source at, government place X. And if I do this story, I'm going to lose them forever and lose access to the fucking 10 people that they connected me to. And so it's easy for me to sit at home and be like, well, of course you should just report the story as is. And then I remember, I'm like, well, these are people too. They got, kids to send to college and whatever.
And they will explicitly say that in like candid conversation, I mean, this is their livelihood. If you've, you really sleep in the bed that you make for yourself. And if you are this access person, that's what you're worth to these companies.
Yeah. Hey guys, if you haven't already subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. It's a huge, huge help. Thank you. Thank you guys for checking out this clip. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe and hit the like button on this video. It is a huge, huge help. And if you'd like to check out this clip's full podcast episode, that link is in the description below or right here. And finally, you can follow me on Instagram and X by using the links in my description below.